So my name is Josh Johnson. For the few people who might not know me, I'm a data architect in UTO, and I'm also the product owner of the Collibra product as of a few months ago. So it's been quite a learning experience jumping on this project, and I'm going to share what I've learned and what we're planning to do, and hopefully make everyone a little bit more confident this is at least headed in the right direction, and possibly that you can even start using it right now. Okay. So on the agenda today, we'll go over the purpose of the project, the strategy being implemented, the community we're serving, the schedule of the implementation, and we'll do some very brief demos. Everyone loves demos. So session's intended for all audiences, whether you're a data citizen, an apprentice, a knight, or a wizard. All are welcome here. We're hoping that the platform eventually offers something for everyone. All right, so let's go over the purpose of the product. So Collibra is ultimately a repository of metadata. If you haven't heard the term metadata, it is data about data. So what we're hoping to turn it into is information about data. And we do that through two different channels, at least initially. One is the Business Glossary, which describes terms you might hear day to day that describe the business processes that we're operating. And then on the other side, we have the data dictionary, which is more technical, and it describes the actual data within the databases themselves. And we'd like to connect those together as well. All right, so a little quote here from Mr. Mike Sharkey, our MC for the day. Data analysis is challenging enough on its own. It's even more challenging when you don't have a good data catalog for a foundation. Collibra advances our enterprise data strategy by ensuring analysts across ASU are using common terms and definitions. All right, so obviously setting the bar pretty high here across the enterprise. All right, we're gonna focus that down a little bit, at least initially. So from our two different perspectives, the Business Glossary and the Data Dictionary, we can answer lots of different types of questions. On the business side, the more data citizen oriented side, you might have just heard a term. You want to know what it is. Well, just like you might go to a dictionary or encyclopedia, we want to have a list of those common terms as well as information about them. We might want to have something happen. So we take those terms and we actually take them a step further and talk about how they function within the business administration. We might want to know, what does the data behind it mean, right? We can relate it to the process, but we also have the structural component that you get from the technical side. And the more technically, where is it? How can we access it? What do we have in general? These are all different questions that we're hoping that Collibra can help to answer. So example use cases, maybe you're a dashboard developer. You need to understand the nuances of the warehouse data you're using because you want to be able to tell an accurate story to everyone who's looking at your dashboards. Maybe you're an integration developer. Well, if you're requesting access to the ODS, you have to know where that data lives first. It's hard to know where something lives if you can't access it to begin with. So Collibra helps to provide kind of a map of where that data resides so that it can help with your access. Maybe you're a data scientist, you want to know what's available that might help your models. Maybe you're a SME and you're really tired of answering the same questions over and over and over, and you're looking for a place to record your knowledge so that you don't have to interact with people every single day. Maybe you're a data steward and you're very worried about people misusing data, so you can record information about the data to help them with their usage. Or maybe you're a BI manager and you want to make sure that you're properly evaluating the business processes that your department manages. So these are all some sample use cases we'll hopefully address along the way. All right, so and then maybe you're Sam and you hope Collibra will help you understand the intention of the data presented in the warehouse. That's a very good early initial goal for our project. All right, so how are we going to do all these things? Let's take a look at the strategy involved. Well, you'll notice there's a lot of cooking metaphors going on in line with our conference today. So we've got a little bit of data dictionary action going on, some business glossary. We talked about both of those. And then over on the side, we might have a little bit of IT asset directory. So not only what data do we have, but what systems are creating that data. And then we might have some data governance. How are we accessing and using this data? Now I'd mentioned data citizens. We kind of look at the business glossary as a possible starting point for that type of a user. And then we have the data dictionary as maybe a possible starting point for data wizards. And we want to make sure that we can, again, address the needs of everyone along this user spectrum. And you might be starting with the glossary. And what we want to do is make sure there's information in the glossary that can help you lead you to the appropriate data assets for a given need. It helps you traverse into working with the data as an apprentice might or wizard might. And then in the other direction, maybe you're starting with actual data and you want to know more about it. We're hoping we can use glossary terms to help clarify the terminology used within the data definitions, provide additional context. So back in the day, when Collibra started, John says, it seemed like the next logical step in helping ASU mature its data governance program. Obviously, we have a lot left to do in that space, and certainly plenty left to do in Collibra. So how do we process all of this? Well, first we go to the source systems and we get the basic metadata. That's just what is in here. What are the table names? What are the column names? What types of data? What are the data types for the columns? Very, very basic information. Some source systems might also include something like a data definition, but not really around here. So first thing we do is just go get that and we'll put it into Collibra. And if you're someone who just needs to know what's out there in general, what the structure of the database looks like, we can address it just with that. Now we might have, that's not enough. You need to know information about the data. What does the data represent? And so now we're going out and we're looking at the SMEs, the subject matter experts, and we're asking them, hey, for these, these high value or these easy to get to assets, we need additional information about them. And again, trying to answer questions that people have without them having to ask the questions to the community or someone specific. Then we want to create relationships between the assets, and this allows people to navigate the system in a logical manner. We organize all of this, again, make it easier to access, traverse the system, and we provide training and documentation to help all the different types of users. All right, so again, we've got our basic data in things like the warehouse, and we have data engineers that pipe all that data in there, right? And so if you look in analytics announcements, for instance, many mornings, you'll see a list of all the tables in Refresh and Redshift, something like that. This is a big job. This is a ton of data. Well, on our side, we've got some additional data engineers, student workers, who use Python scripts to pull out the metadata from that data. And we use a tool called Prefect to orchestrate all of this. And that metadata then gets stored within Collibra. All right, so the green triangle at the top, this is everything that actually lives within Collibra. There's no data within Collibra. Not really. We have some sample data and things like that sometimes, but the data lives elsewhere. And that's partially for security, partially because there's no real need to. And again, that metadata is very structural. Well, if we want that enriched metadata, the top of the pyramid, the golden tip, what we do is we pipe it out and we have to have an interface. Right now, the interface is Google Sheets. So there's Google Sheets out there where we again have all this metadata stored, but there's an ability to also go out and add that enrichment. So descriptions, sample data values, all that type of thing. And then we pipe it back from the Google Sheet into Collibra. And so the SMEs would primarily act with the Google Sheets, adding the enrichment, and most users would actually go to the Collibra system itself, at least for now. So we are working feverishly on training materials to help people use the system. We'll have this link available to get you there. Right now, it's just a simple Google Doc. We're going to be adding to it probably quite a bit over the next couple months. And it's focused on 5 different types of users. So we got your typical business users, our consumers of information. And this is going to be very, business glossary heavy citizens. Then we've got our more technical users. We're looking more towards the data dictionary. SMEs who are providing that enrichment, the actual integration developers and system administrators that manage the platform itself. All right, so who all is in that community that we're creating all these resources for? Well, first we have the Collibra product team. And that, in our analogy here, is the kitchen staff. So on our team, we've got our integration developers. These are 3 student workers. And I mentioned they create their Python scripts, they orchestrate them, and that pipes the metadata back and forth between the different platforms. We're going to be replacing our system administrator. Some of you might remember Travis. The system administrator essentially manages the platform, makes sure that proper settings are in place, the appropriate resources are in place, technical resources. And then they work with actual Collibra technical support if there's any troubleshooting that has to be done that can't be managed internally. We have our steering community, and I see at least a few of them are currently in the room. They help us to plan our roadmap for Collibra. We monitor different needs. We think of different approaches to solve different problems. We do prioritization. And if you are interested in joining us, we have open meetings. The next one is going to be Friday morning. And keep an eye on the Collibra Slack channel for dates and times, but they are regularly, they are monthly. And then Callie is the business analyst / project manager, and I'm the product owner. And we're going to be out there interfacing with the community to help, again, define requirements, prioritization, working with the system administrator and the integration developers to kind of optimize the implementation of all our needs and work on the documentation. Okay, our content providers, AKA our ingredient suppliers. So we have, I mentioned SMEs earlier, right? These are people who have a detailed, in-depth understanding of the data and what it represents. But then we also have the data stewards who are ultimately responsible for how the data is used by people across the university. They typically provide access and things like that. Asset system managers, so these are the people who manage the applications that are creating the data. And then really anyone who's using Collibra can provide information, right? Those Google Sheets that I mentioned, those are open. Anyone can go out there and say, hey, I see there's not a description for this field. I know what this is. Anyone can go out there and add that. So you have the power. So ways to support the project. I mentioned the steering committees, the 3rd Friday of each month, from 11 to 12. I mentioned the Google Sheets. Here is how you can access them. All these links that I'm showing you are also available in a couple other places, so don't need to write them down or anything. We're looking to get back into prompts through our Slack channel for those high value assets. So we might say, hey, we need a description for this. Who can help us out? And then we crowdsource these descriptions that way. If you are let's say direct messaging Jennifer Hornsby and getting all kinds of fantastic information about something. Feel free to share that if it might be applicable to anyone else. If you are creating new tables, especially in the data warehouse, make sure you're documenting that during the development, because no one likes to go back after it's done and do documentation. And then when you're making changes to anything, just keep those documents updated. So yes, write things down. All right, our consumers, which in our analogy are consumers. So we have people like, I just call them college data analysts. Not everyone works in a college. We've certainly got some plussers on the line. There's plenty of people in business and finance and departments like that. But in general, these are people who are using data, and they might want to just better understand it. Application integration developers, people who are moving data between systems, and again, anyone using data to answer business questions. These are our consumers. So for all our different users, we do have our annual survey. If you'd like to take this and you haven't yet, there are links in 3 different Slack channels, as well as a couple different websites. I believe there's one actually on the front page of the Collibra system right now. We have 26 responses, which is probably good enough for a baseline right now, just because we're so early into the project. It was very easy to find a pattern. We did only have 1 data citizen. We had 4 apprentices, 1 who had never even heard of Collibra before the survey. And then we had 17 knights and wizards. We asked the question, where do you go to get information? Our goal is for people to go to Collibra first. Right? That's why we're building this platform. Most people are going to coworkers right now. That's not an efficient process. So we're looking to move this metric every year when we do this survey. We had 1 person who is using the platform weekly. Most people are using it once or twice, so far at least. And again, we want to move people from once or twice to regular usage. We actually did have 3 of our users who had a somewhat positive response to the landing page, and made some improvements to that recently. So hopefully that number will start going up a little bit more. The search tool and the browse tool, not great. So that's going to be certainly focus of attention over the next few months. Most users have not used the Business Glossary, and there's a reason for that. Right now, the glossary is very financial term intensive, and that's because our previous BA came from the financial industry and was able to fill all that out. So we'll be making an effort to add more academic terms in there, especially as we build out the data dictionary and require those academic terms. The biggest complaint was definitions for data are not usually filled in. Absolutely. And feel free to support the project by adding definitions to things. And then we also had some feedback that the search and UI needs improvement. And we have a couple projects out there hoping to address that as well over quite a bit of time. Ultimately, our net promoter score, not great. 81% were detractors. I think there was 1 promoter. Thank you, whoever you are, but you're certainly optimistic. And we want to make sure that as time goes on, that red bar gets smaller and that blue bar gets bigger. So we'll be monitoring this as we do our development. Okay, so we've got all these things in the works. What's that look like? Currently have this broken into a few different areas. So we have basic support. We've been working on a dashboard to monitor content within the system. So how many things do we have and how complete is the enriched metadata around those? That development's going to continue going for at least a couple more months. It's a lot of complexities yet to work out to get all of it working smoothly. But you might have noticed, every once in a while I give an updated RWG based on manual reviews of things. I mentioned earlier, we're also developing a lot of training materials, so we're going to be continuing that. Our integrations, The system kind of had integrations for Redshift, ODS, and Dash, the Data Analytics Success Hub, before we kind of had all this changeover in the last few months. We are essentially rebuilding those to make them more reliable, more consistent, allow us to schedule them. That's going to go through the end of the year. Then we're going to start working on user databases and S3. S3 had kind of been started at one point, but didn't really make it to prime time. We're going to be doing some stuff with Alteryx as well as ServiceNow. On the content side of things, been working with Ed Plus, doing their tables, their Redshift tables, as well as corporate partner tables within the data dictionary. Hoping to get that wrapped up by the end of the year. A lot of this is waiting on some integration development to be completed. I've been working on the build a major map data for another project, and so I'm looking to also copy that over into the data dictionary for other people to reference. Knowledge Enterprises has been working on sorting out what's in the warehouse from their system, and they've been doing documentation as well, so working with them. Grad College has started, and then some people might have used my reports and noticed that you could kind of get information about tables and columns as you're doing development. I think I've found where all that came from, and so we're looking to pull all of that out of the actual PeopleSoft tables and capture as much as possible within Collibra, and that includes some definitions as well as like which department owns this record. We'll be doing some stuff with student finances and financial aid, hopefully in the first quarter of the new year, or the third quarter of the current year if you're on the fiscal side of things. And then, as I mentioned earlier, our academic terms in the glossary are lacking. So once we have all this data, hopefully we'll be able to add that additional context. And then eventually we want data lineage. So we want to know, where is this data coming from and where is it being used? And so we're going to try to construct a plan around lineage content. On the user interface side, we have a couple different projects. One is trying to create a business-oriented kind of conceptual entity relationship diagram that allows people to navigate the databases. It directs them based on different business processes and things like that, highly visual. It would be really cool if we could figure out how to do it, but there's still a lot of technical and functional details to work out. And we're also hoping to create an interface with the analytics.asu.edu portal so that you could use that to search instead of the Collibra interface. And possibly also, again, along with the lineage, it might allow us to better tie in reports to the data that the reports use. So that's where we're going. Mute everyone here. And as usual, we're monitoring Slack. When there's some great content that goes out there, we try to capture as much as possible in Collibra for future use, because finding things in Slack aren't always easy. All right, so on the integration side of things, we started with the Redshift warehouse. We added this Google Sheets component for the enrichment. We're doing ODS, the Dash stuff, which comes from user databases and goes out to the analytics portal in Drupal, and Salesforce Enterprise. So these are what we're currently working on. I mentioned we have some of the others coming up. I didn't go into a whole lot of detail about some of these. Alteryx, for instance, we have macros that are available in FSX. We're hoping to capture those. But also in the Alteryx gallery, we have workflows. Down the road, we might have apps and APIs available, so we'd like to be able to document those. We're also starting up the SQL snippet repository. We might use Collibra to document that. There's been a request to capture or create a repository for API endpoints. And then this morning, some of you might have gone to Kristen's presentation. We have BI training materials. Collibra might be a place to store the metadata around those as well. And we also have been working on an integration with ServiceNow where we have a form where you can report data problems. And then we can work to address those in various ways by documenting or routing appropriately. Still trying to figure out the details here. I noticed that there have actually been a few forms submitted. Some of them not even remotely what the form's meant for, but it's out there. Just don't expect anything immediately as we work out this process.